his research and knowledge group said, by the name of Hudson Reel. One of those names where we don't know whether the person speaking is a boy or a girl, or a man or a woman. So the NRA paid its CEO Don Sweeney more than $3.8 million in total compensation, including a bonus of $1.7 million, which is insane. If the total compensation were computed hourly, it would amount to an incredible. And yes, I do have the number here. $1,867.88 per hour as of 4 years ago, which would, and remember, the earnings for the NRA has only gone up over time, which would take a minimum wage worker 247 hours or 6 weeks of full-time work to earn what she makes in an hour. Literally in an hour. So that's the incredible thing. The NRA has long claimed that increasing the government's wage floor would ratchet up restaurants' labor costs and result in thousands of jobs being lost. But the results show the NRA's rhetoric on the minimum wage is failing to move the American public. Indeed, as Democrats embrace a $15 per hour minimum wage ahead of the 2020 presidential campaign, the NRA is moving in the opposite direction. So, one of the big things are from this NRA poll shows industry messaging backfiring. The leaked NRA poll is the first instance of a known poll commissioned by the industry itself that shows how widely popular raising the minimum wages and how small the opposition is, even though other published national surveys have shown a similar level of public support. So the support there for the minimum wage is there. Multiple polls, including this Inside the Industry poll, show it. The leaked poll also sheds light on arguments the NRA has made through its local proxies in its campaigns against raising the minimum wage. One of the arguments routinely made by the industry representatives is that raising the minimum wage will raise costs for the consumers. But the NRA's own poll shows that by an overwhelming majority, the customers are willing to pay more for a fair wage. In the words of Luntz Global, wait for it. They want the increase in spite of the cost, so they just don't care. So here's the two positions. Increase the federal minimum wage, even if it also increases the cost of food and service to customers. That's 71% of people say that. And then keep the federal minimum wage the same, even if the average food service market employee couldn't make ends meet. So it's a pretty encouraging situation there. Like, there's no doubt about that. It's a very encouraging situation there that we can see people are actually coming on to support this, and they just don't care. They raise the minimum wage now. So good job, Luntz Global. The pollsters asked if you had to choose, you would say the government should increase the federal minimum wage, even if it also increases the cost of food and services to customers. According to the poll results, the same portion of people who favor raising the minimum wage are also willing to pay more to make it happen. Again, 71%. A small minority of those surveyed just didn't really care, and they're like, oh, whatever. So, so the poll didn't include information on political party identification of the survey respondents, but it was stratified demographically and geographically. Even though the Luntz survey shows that the restaurant customers are willing to pay more, the league poll shows the messaging that the NRA is continuing to deploy to try to stop restaurants raising the minimum wage. That includes the claim the restaurants will go out of business if the minimum wage goes up. That is, the NRA's arguments disregard its own survey results that customers are willing to pay higher costs to support a higher wage for their neighbors. The strongest polling message in the poll was on the standard of living. A minimum wage increase will improve people's standards of living by providing them with a more appropriate income level to handle cost of living increases. In the poll, 43% found that to be the most persuasive message, followed by the finding that raising the minimum wage would help lift nearly 17 million Americans out of the poverty level despite working full-time, which is, again, it's a big problem in America. Someone, Bernie Sanders, was one of the few, actually, I think the only candidate really to strongly address and present a plan for. Hillary Clinton may have mentioned it, but I don't remember. like that being like part of his her stump speech in the campaign, like that's a real problem in America. So many people who work full time in this country still live in poverty, and that's just not right. That's why we call it a living wage. That's why I, as someone who's a progressive and many other progressives, support the $15 minimum wage. So it's like just around the threshold where if you make that amount of money, you pretty much end up getting paid a certain amount of money, $15 an hour, and it's one of the few lowest numbers where you can actually make ends meet and live. That's like the minimum wage many people have now. It's just not a living wage. It just really isn't. So that's the problem. In the poll, 43% found that to be the most persuasive message. As we know, the increase the minimum wage. The least persuasive message was reducing inequality in general, which prompted the Luntz group to proclaim, "Let your opponents own inequality if they must." So the inequality line was not very effective. Another strong argument, though, according to the leak poll, was that raise is needed to help increase the cost of living because the federal minimum wage has only risen 3 times in the past 3 decades. That was another very good persuasive argument. So another advice they had for the NRA, the Luntz group, the leak poll also showcased arguments the NRA uses to pivot away from efforts to raise wages, changing the subject to make things more two things like the claim reducing taxes would give workers more take-home pay, or that increasing funding for healthcare benefits would be a better alternative. So, not really, because it's still, you can spend on healthcare, which is nice, but wait a minute, you still don't have it. Still don't have any money for food, for housing, for anything else like that, because it's just, you need the general money. You can spend that general money on healthcare just as easily. It's more useful if you may raise that minimum wage. So the Luntz Global polling shows that the biggest concern among Democrats and swing voters is ensuring that American workers have access to quality, affordable health care by 51% and 43%, respectively. So Democrats for 51, and swing voters 43. So for Republicans, that was also a high priority, but it came close. Became a close second to protecting American workers by changing the immigration policy at 33 and 29%. So for the swing voters, it was 29%. Other parts of the league poll and slide deck did not specify support by a political party, but the NRA has joined the GOP efforts against the Affordable Care Act and supported efforts to repeal it, in addition to its PAC supporting GOP candidates who campaign on the repeal. So it's not like they're actually for doing something about healthcare. They support the GOP efforts on healthcare, which is something that maybe by pro minimum wage raising people could pretty easily identify, which could be actually quite effective. Yeah, so that's a good strategy moving forward, and very interesting to see that this actually came in and turned out like that. Which it's actually it's quite fascinating, I have to say. So yeah, James Comey, as we now move on, he sees himself as a victim of Donald Trump. He refuses to see the victims of the justice system. In his new book, James Comey portrays himself as a law enforcement saint who desire only the best for us, and the best is manifestly not President Donald Trump. But if you were to hire loyalty with more than its anti-Trump morsels in mind, a less benevolent version of Comey emerges, akin to the King George character in Hamilton, who lovingly sings to his rebellious American subjects, in which when push comes to shove, I will send a fully armed battalion to remind you of my love. It's actually not that's such a Hamilton line, though. When push comes to shove. Oh, Lynn. Yeah. So pretty much that's kind of how it's going to work. Like, James Comey, he's not one of us, kind of. He's like, I come from a higher standard and higher morality. That's why a higher loyalty pretty much is like a higher social class. Like, I'm part of the Washington elite. Like, that's definitely, in my opinion, the message he kind of portrays there. So, yeah, more stories about Comey's best-selling memoir have focused on the Hamlet-like, agonizing over his potential role in tilting the 2016 election, and his horror at discovering that Trump, once in the White House, was thuggishly corrupt as the mafia dons Comey had prosecuted before he led the FBI and got fired by Trump. But Comey's insistence on upholding the law is devotional to the point of ruthlessness, as he makes clear, explaining the need to send Martha Stewart to jail in 2003 for lying about an insider stock tip she had received. People must fear the consequences of lying in the justice system, but the system can't work. There was once a time when most people worried about going to hell if they violated an oath taken in the name of God. The divine deterrence has slipped away from our modern cultures. In its place, people must fear going to jail. They must fear their lives being turned upside down. They must fear their pictures splashed on newspapers and websites. People must fear having their names forever associated with a criminal act if we are to have a nation with the rule of law. Just reading that statement before I break down, it just sounds creepy. It sounds like someone like, it sounds like someone like this fascist leader would be like screaming in the streets in like some movie. If I was at a podium, man, picture me in a podium in a crowded square of a bunch of people looking up at me like this. So like the divine deterrence has slipped away from our modern society. In its place, people must fear going to jail. They must fear their lives being turned upside down. They must fear their pictures splashed on newspapers and websites. People must fear having their names forever associated with a criminal act if we are ever again to have a nation with the rule of law. Like this is ridiculous and dangerous because it suggests Americans are insufficiently cowed by the godlike wrath of the machinery of law enforcement. Comey is worried that the country risks degenerating to criminality and sloth, and that all that's standing between us and chaos is the FBI's lash and our submission to it. No, the justice system is plenty all right without your interference, my guy. So sorry about that, James Comey. The FBI is not considered by most people, not considered really by me, to be a major part of Americans' day-to-day lives. It's more the NSA's thing. But, yeah, it's really quite crazy. The fact that that's the place where we stand from. So, Comey sounds much like retired General John Kelly, the White House Chief of Staff, who recently bemoaned the lost discipline of an earlier and supposedly sunnier era. He said, when I was a kid growing up, a lot of things were sacred in our country. During a bitter press conference in which he actually tried to smear of a member of Congress who had accurately reported a grieving war widow was offended by the comments Trump made in a fumbled condolence call. Women were sacred, looked upon with great honor. The South is not the case anymore, as we can see from recent cases. Life, the dignity of life, is sacred. That's gone. Religion, that seems to be gone as well. Go turn on Fox News and please go away, bud. Go moan and groan with your fellow conservatives and your fellow, the country is gone, we need to take it back. Those kind of people. Just please go moan and groan with them and leave us to our normal lives. Thank you very much. That would be very helpful. Yeah, so like Kelly, Comey flames his blinkered nostalgia as public virtue, but he just does it better. And he's actually more successful at it because of his interactions largely with Donald Trump. His book has been lavishly and warmly received by the media. Comey certainly read about the danger of Trump, but that doesn't mean he's read about other things. For instance, he shows minimal concern for police killing black men and the protest movement that's grown out of them. He seems unable to believe the poor and minority communities have a fair case against the way the law enforcement has been practiced on them. And believe me, they do. I don't think that needs any saying or suggesting here. Comey needs to do his research on that. In a short chapter on racial injustice, Comey describes the killing of Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, and Walter Scott and Freddie Gray as tragic deaths, but he turns the killings around, lamenting the dominant perceptions of police. They swamped and overshadowed millions of positive professional encounters between citizens and police officers, and extraordinary anger was building towards the all uninformed law enforcement. Yes, Comey really went there, blaming victims of police abuse for making people upset that the police was abusing them. Good job. That takes some special skills there, bud.